Hello everybody, MinishCap1 here. Hope you all are having a wonderful day. Currently, Singed is looking a little bit crazy. And this video is not going to be complaining about nerfs at all. Nerfs are probably going to happen. This video is explaining Singed and the concept of power budget and why I think that the Minion poison execution mechanic that was added earlier this year, back in March, I believe, needs to be removed, in my opinion, completely removed for this champion to be balanceable in every elo to make him fair for and rewarding for all players of the champion. So, what happened this patch? Riot made some changes to Singed. So, red side Singed no longer deals less damage. There was a bug for a few years now that Singed means we were aware about it. We didn't know exactly what was going on, however, until Riot Phreak went and hunted down the bug and fixed it. So shout out to Riot Phreak for that one. But we knew that red side Singed was a little bit weird. But what ended up happening, or what was happening for a few years now, was that on red side, the first, so poison trail ticks every 1/4 of a second for 2 seconds. So 0, 0.25, 0.75, and then back to 0. What was happening was that 0 tick was just missing on red side for champions. So we were losing a lot of damage on red side, which meant that red side Singed was like, I forget, Riot Phreak made a whole video about this. I think he said it was like 4% lower win rate than blue side, which didn't make sense because if you're on red side, you have counter pick for top lane. You should have a higher winner on red side on a champion like Singed, in my opinion, but that wasn't the case. He was much lower on red side. Now we know why, because we were losing a bunch of damage. Another thing that happened this patch was that Riot increased the rate at which Poison Trail will refresh on enemy champions. So this is not directly adding like a DPS number. It's not directly adding like, oh, Poison just does more damage. But what it's doing is Poison will previously check every 1/2 second if someone's inside the poison trail, and if they're inside of it, reapply poison, which poison itself lasts for a little over 2 seconds. Now that's going to check every 1/4 second, every 1/4 second, 0.25 seconds. Meaning that if someone's setting in poison, every 1/4 second, are they in poison? Repoison. Are they in poison? Repoison. So at the end of Poison Trail, when someone's walking out of it, what ends up happening is very often now, very consistently, they will eat a couple of extra ticks of poison because they will get refreshed the duration of Poison Trail right before, right as they're leaving the Poison Trail, much more consistently. And because this mechanic itself is very consistent, I believe that this is actually adding a lot of win rate to the champion. Because you might as well have written this as if like, quote, like if this patch notes was written differently, it could just say, red side Singed no longer deals less damage, Poison Trail lasts longer, right? Which is essentially just a straight up damage buff because of how consistent this is. And so I think low-key, even though Singed went from about 50% win rate up to like 53 to 55%, depending on where you look, I think that this is actually adding a lot of win rate currently, more than what people suspect. Another thing that happened this patch was, for the first day of the patch, Singed was super bugged, where he was able to apply Riftmaker and Cosmic Drive to minions. I think that this also added some win rate, but that was also hotfixed. So, I DM'd, so here, yeah, 55% win rate, or 53% win rate, depending where you look. I DM'd Riot Phreak and Riot Phroxzon about this, about my thoughts. I'll read you the one I sent to Phroxzon because it shows the whole message, but I don't actually have Phreak on Discord. I just messaged him on Reddit. I know he's on Reddit sometimes. I don't know if you read it, but I got left on red by both of them, so I said, essentially, prior to this patch, Singed has not felt very great to play in high elo because of the minion execution on Q. He ate a lot of direct and indirect nerfs as a result. A lot of his items were nerfed, and he hasn't felt good to play. I think the 0.25 Poison Trail refresh actually adds quite a bit of power, but the main problem, I think, with the champion is that the minion execution just takes up too much of Singed's power budget. If every champion has imagine a circle for every champion, that's their power budget, and then slices of that circle are aspects of their kit. The minion execution, for one, didn't even exist prior to this year. And so before, it took up 0 power budget because it wasn't there. Now it's in the kit, and in my opinion, it takes up way too much of Singed's power budget because they had to nerf so many different aspects of his kit to justify that minion execution being there, and as a result, high elo Singed players are suffering because we already farmed pretty well, and low elo Singed players have what is a champion that, in my opinion, can never be balanced for them because of the quote-unquote perfect CS, right? So Singed previously was very well balanced across all elos. You could literally, on many patches before this, for years, you had Singed where he was like higher win rate in high elo, like average win rate in medium elo, and then like maybe a little bit higher win rate in lower elo, but not much. He actually went from essentially like a low-ish win rate in lower to medium elo to a higher win rate in high elo, which is like a very well balanced champion in my opinion, because it shows that the better you are at the champion, the more rewarded that you are for playing him, which was really, really good in terms of just win rate skew in my opinion. However, now what it is with the minion execution is that Singed is a low elo skewed champion where his win rate in lower elo is always going to be higher than his win rate in higher elo because he's been nerfed so much in terms of his laning, kit, his items, his abilities, everything, where in high elo it's just a lot harder to execute him because of these nerfs, and the minion execution, the guaranteed quote-unquote CS, doesn't really help us that much because in high elo we already farm pretty well, especially me anecdotally. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I went from 7.7 CS last year per minute to 8.2 CS per minute this year, so I gain half a minion per minute in exchange for all of these nerfs. Hella not worth it for me or other high-low Singed players in my opinion. So here's a comment from Riot Phreak just stating that, yeah, they're probably going to nerf Singed and Rumble, because Rumble was also affected by the red side bug because they gained a lot of win rate. So I actually made a PowerPoint about this, which I will get into right now, and I'll try and get through this quickly so as to not bore you guys for too long. So I might stand up, right? I'm in kind of a stand-up mood. We'll see what happens. I might grab the mic, but let's get to it. So, presentation, Singed and power budget. Let me move the webcam. Sorry, I'm a little bit here. Let's go right here. Presentation, Singed and power budget by MinishCap1. All right, what has happened so far? Let's move the webcam again. What has happened so far? In patch 25.06, Poison Trail was changed to execute minions. The health on Singed was nerfed. The fling was nerfed from 60 to 55%, so 5%. I did not include things that were nerfed and then reverted, which there was a lot of that. Such as like the passive, the Poison Trail was nerfed and reverted in terms of ratio. Didn't add that stuff, but a lot of that happened. Patch 25.07, next patch, Ultimate was nerfed by 5 stats at all ranks. At level 1 Ultimate, this is very noticeable. You do not feel nearly as strong at level 1 as you used to. With Insanity Potion. Patch 25.08, next patch, Deadman's nerfed by 10% slow resistance. Patch 25.09, next patch after that, Swiftness Boots nerfed by 5 movement speed. Patch 25.10, next patch after that, Liandry's nerfed by 10 ability power. So, what does this mean? It means that when you add up the Ultimate nerf and the Swiftness nerf, we lost 10 movement speed. When you add up the Liandry's nerf and the Ultimate nerf, we lost 15 ability power there. When you combine that with Deadman's nerf, we're also much more easily susceptible to crowd control. Then you add all of that to the fact that the ratio on Fling was nerfed, there's even more damage lost there, and the health nerf on top of that, with us being more easily kiteable, just means that we're, in general, a squishier champion as well. In addition to that, previously in recent memory, like last year or before that, I think this is all Season 14, was that Rylai's was also nerfed by 10 AP, so you can argue that it was actually a net loss of 25 AP, not 15 AP. Riftmaker was nerfed from 12% to 8% damage amp. The item is trash now, in my opinion. And Singed armor growth is also nerfed, so we're slower, we're more kiteable, we're more susceptible to CC, we're squishier, and we deal less damage. And our abilities literally are all worth less, except for Poison Trail. And W, I guess, but the current patch, what happened in this patch? So the top note is the hotfix, where the Riftmaker and Cosmic Drive and all that stuff, Bloodletter's Curse, no longer apply on himself or on minions. That's the hotfix. The patch itself, you can see here at the bottom, the debuff duration increased to 2.2 seconds from 2.1. This is just a way for them to hard code the Poison Trail not being bugged for red side, and then the reapplication was increased to 0.25 instead of 0.5, meaning that there is potentially the increased poison trail duration at the end of it when people are exiting poison trail, which is very consistent, which is essentially a damage buff in my opinion, which led to a lot of win rate as well. I think people are very underestimating of how much damage it's actually added. Season 15 so far. What has happened this season so far? Move webcam again. The season starts out pretty average, you know. It's not the best season start I've ever seen, not the worst season start I've ever seen. Season 14 start was a little bit more fun in my opinion, but season 15 has been a little bit more balanced overall. So it was pretty average start, not great, not terrible, maybe it's slightly above average, okay? Then Singed gets changed so that Poison Trail executes minions. This adds a lot of power, and Singed gets direct nerfs as a result of this. Singed also gets indirectly nerfed in the form of several items after that. Then Singed feels under-rewarding to play for months. For months up and from like, essentially from March until now. Today is August 18th. He has felt very under-rewarding in my opinion. Then Singed gets bug fixed and rebuffed this patch. The numbers are a little bit overshot in my opinion, as the win rates show, and he will likely be nerfed in the next patch. So this leads me into my next point, the main point of this video. What is power budget? What is power budget, guys? So, like I said, if you imagine a pie chart, or if you imagine like a percentage out of 100, different aspects of a champion's kit, including the items that they build, their core items, will take up parts of that champion's power budget, quote unquote. Every champion is supposed to have the same power budget, which is how they balance the game, quote unquote, to make it so that certain aspects of a character's kit can take up more or less of their power budget to accentuate or minimize, to amplify or minimize aspects of their kit, right? So if we imagine, and I'm not saying this is how exactly it was, but this is how it felt. If we imagine Singe's power budget before the Minion Trail execution was added, we could see that Poison Trail, Ultimate, Move Speed, laning and items, these all took up very reasonable aspects of Singe's power budget, right? He's a pretty ult-reliant champion, right? The Ultimate takes up a lot of his power budget. Poison Trail's main ability takes up a lot of his power budget. Laning, Singe's laning is not very good, less power budget. His items, they were okay, nerfed a bit, less power budget, and he's a fast champion, so move speed takes a bit of his power budget as well. I'm just using examples here. This is not meant to be exact. I'm more so trying to teach what power budget is. So if you imagine this for a character, for example, let's say Malphite. Malphite's power budget is going to be mostly in his ultimate and his W, which gives him a bunch of armor, right? His E and his Q, they're good abilities, but they're not, in my opinion, what defines Malphite as a champion. Another example is Rammus. A lot of Rammus's power budget is going to be inside of his taunt and his spiky shell ability, I forget what it's called, where he gains a bunch of armor MR and he reflects damage. Scion, a bunch of Scion's power budget is going to be inside of his W that infinitely stacks health. What's another, Riven, a bunch of Riven's power budget is going to be inside of her Q, right? Which is like her main ability. Her other abilities are just not as important as her Q. They are important, right? But everything in Riven exists to set up her Q, which is her main tool, right? These are just examples, and again, I'm not saying this is exactly how Singe's power budget was, but this is kind of how it felt. But if we move forward to the Minion Poison Trail execution patch, this is what it feels like currently. It feels like they added the Minion execution, and that takes up a massive portion of Singe's power budget at the cost of everything else, right? So now laning is even weaker, items are even worse, move speed we're slower, ultimate's even weaker, Poison Trail is sort of the prisoner of Minion execution, unfortunately. It just feels like excuse me, it just feels like the Minion execution takes up way too much of the power budget. It feels like the champion is being worked around this mechanic, which will just make him become impossible to balance, right? It is, I'm quoting Riot Endstep, doesn't matter. Riot End Step is a writer, and I talked to him about this change. He worked on this. He specifically said that the Singed Minion execution is the most powerful execution for minions they've ever put in the game, right? And for a champion to have a tool like that, they need to be very, very closely monitored, in my opinion, to make sure that they're rewarding for players in all elo brackets instead of rewarding for players only in low elo brackets. I have nothing against Riot End Step. Cool guy, honestly. I have nothing against like low elo players. Love you guys. But the point of the video is essentially that I just think that the power budget, too much of this is taken up by the minion execution, which means that the higher elo that you go as you play Singed, the less rewarding that he becomes, because this mechanic just has caused the rest of his kit to become so nerfed, the rest of his items to become so nerfed, that it feels very unfair, right? For a champion that was previously balanced very well, in my opinion, across all ratings, to become now quite low elo skewed. So, Singed's current state, prior to this patch, he was previously a champion that was well balanced in all elos. He is currently heavily skewed, however, towards low elo because of the minion execution. His laning and kit were nerfed to the point where he is very unrewarding for experienced players in high elo, such as myself, and many other high elo players that I've spoken to have echoed this sentiment as well. Anecdotally, my CS per minute went from 7.7 to 8.2, so I gained 1/2 a minion per minute in exchange for all of these nerfs, which is very, very not worth it. All right. Possible solutions. I simply do not believe that the minion execution can be maintained while keeping Singed fair and balanced for all ratings. I think that straight up removing the minion execution mechanic is the best course forward. The minion execution mechanic is simply too powerful for low elo players and simply not worth the power budget for high elo players. It helps low elo too much, and it helps high elo almost none. So we end up in high elo eating tons of nerfs to the kit in exchange for noobs to be able to farm, right? It's not fair for long-term veteran Singed players to be forced into a weaker champion so that noobs can farm. And it's also not fair for low elo players to be given an auto-farming champion that's going to teach them bad habits, lazy laning, lazy farming, right? It's just, I don't think that it's good for anybody involved. I think that it makes the champion brain dead in low elo and useless in high elo for the most part. I just don't think that it's a good mechanic for the character to have moving forward, because I think it makes him a champion that's already kind of hard to balance, even harder to balance, and I think that it needs to go, personally. I don't think that this can stay for the health of the character, right? Imagine, let's see, imagine if, maybe this is a bad example, never mind, scratch that thought. Yeah, what are you guys' thoughts? I'm not sure, like, I'm not a game designer. I don't know if they're insisting on keeping this mechanic on the champion. I just don't see that it's healthy in the long term. I think it's worse for all Singed players. It's just, that's it. It's just worse for all Singed players, because low elo players are taught extremely lazy gameplay, and high elo players just have a weaker champion for essentially no exchange of reward. So yeah, it kind of sucks. Hopefully someone at Riot sees this video. Hopefully I'm not just yelling into the void. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Is it a good solution to remove the minion execution? I believe so. I don't think that it can be maintained while keeping him fair for all ratings. I also think that the 0.25 refresh duration or refresh rate was a very large addition of power compared to what people think, but I guess let's see how it goes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Maybe other possible solutions, what you think of my solution of just removing the execution straight up. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Mwah. Peace, guys.